My name is Grace Whitfield. I'm 41 years old. 3 years ago, I buried my husband, Daniel. He was 44. A heart attack took him in his sleep, and I woke up next to a man who was already gone. Everyone tells you grief has stages. Nobody tells you that grief also comes with paperwork, mortgage documents, insurance claims, a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet at the same time. Daniel and I bought that house together 12 years ago. A modest 2-story colonial with a garden he built with his own hands. Every room held a memory. The kitchen where he burned pancakes every Sunday, the porch where we planned our future, the study where he kept his books stacked exactly the way he liked them. After he died, I couldn't bring myself to change a single thing. The house wasn't just a house. It was the last place Daniel had lived, laughed, and loved. My in-laws, Robert and Linda, were kind to me in the beginning. They checked on me every week. They brought food I didn't eat and sat with me in silence when I couldn't speak. I was grateful. I thought grief had brought us closer. Then there was Marcus, Daniel's younger brother, 36 years old, still living in his parents' basement, still waiting for a break that never seemed to come. Marcus had tried 3 businesses that failed. He'd been engaged twice, both times calling it off when things got difficult. Whenever life got hard for Marcus, his parents were there to soften the landing. I never judged him for it. Every family has someone who needs more support. I simply never expected that support to come from me. 8 months after Daniel's funeral, Robert called me. Grace, we should talk. As a family. I drove to their house that evening, still wearing my scrubs from the hospital where I work as a physical therapist. Marcus was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with his arms crossed, avoiding my eyes. Linda wouldn't look at me either. Robert cleared his throat. Marcus's lease is ending next month. He has nowhere to go. I nodded slowly, unsure where this was headed. I'm sorry to hear that. Linda reached across the table and took my hand, the same way she used to when we cried together over Daniel. Grace, honey, you have that big house all to yourself. It's too much space for one person. Marcus could use it. It would be good for him. A fresh start. I sat there for a moment, certain I had misheard her. You want me to give Marcus my house? Not give, Robert said quickly. Just let him stay there. It's Daniel's house too, after all. It should stay in the family. I felt something cold settle in my chest. It's my house. Daniel and I bought it together. My name is on the deed. Marcus finally spoke, his voice flat. Come on, Grace. You're rattling around in there by yourself. I actually need it. I looked at him, at the same face that used to sit across from Daniel at Thanksgiving, laughing about nothing. Marcus, I live in that house because it's the only place I still feel close to your brother. Linda's eyes filled with tears, but not the kind of tears I expected. Daniel would want his family taken care of. I stood up. My hands were shaking. Daniel would want his wife left in peace. The room went silent. I grabbed my coat and walked out before anyone could say another word. As I drove home, I told myself it was just a bad night. A grieving family saying things they didn't mean. I had no idea they had already been planning behind my back, and that within days, they would try to take from me the one thing that still felt like home. I barely slept that night. Robert's words echoed in my mind. It's Daniel's house too. It should stay in the family. As if I wasn't family. As if 3 years of marriage, 12 years together, meant less than blood. The next morning, I went to work like always, moving patients through their exercises, smiling when I didn't feel like smiling. Work had become my anchor since Daniel died. The one place where grief had no room to breathe. But that day, even work couldn't quiet my mind. 2 days later, my phone rang. It was Linda. Her voice was unusually warm. Grace, can you stop by this afternoon? We'd like to finish our conversation properly. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten, but I agreed anyway. Some part of me still hoped this could be resolved with a real conversation, not the ambush from before. When I pulled into their driveway, I saw Marcus's car, and beside it, a car I didn't recognize. A man in a gray suit stood by the front door, a leather folder tucked under his arm. Robert greeted me at the door, unusually cheerful. Grace, this is Mr. Coleman. He's a family law attorney. We thought it would help to have things explained properly. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a conversation. This was an ambush with paperwork. Mr. Coleman shook my hand politely and gestured toward the dining table, where a stack of documents was already laid out. Mrs. Whitfield, I understand there's a family property matter to resolve. Given that the house was purchased during the marriage, and given the family's wishes, we believe a transfer of residency rights could be arranged smoothly, with your cooperation. I stared at the papers. Property transfer forms. Occupancy agreements. My name typed neatly at the bottom. Waiting for a signature I had no intention of giving. Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, watching me like he already knew how this would end. It's not permanent, Grace. Just until I get back on my feet. I looked at him steadily. The last 3 businesses were also just until you got back on your feet. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Linda's voice softened, the way it always did when she wanted something. Honey, this is what family does. We help each other. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. No. I've made my decision, and it hasn't changed. Robert's expression darkened. Think carefully, Grace. If you shut Marcus out now, don't expect this family to be there for you later. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the threat. I've never once asked this family for anything. Not before Daniel died, and not after. I stood, pushed the untouched papers back across the table, and walked to the door. Before I left, I turned around one last time. I loved Daniel with everything I had. That doesn't mean I owe his family my home. Then I walked out, got into my car, and drove away, my hands trembling on the wheel. That evening, I arrived home feeling hollowed out from the entire day. As I turned onto my street, something looked wrong. A moving truck was parked in front of my house. Marcus's old car sat in my driveway. My heart began to race as I parked and hurried toward the front door. It was already open. Marcus walked out carrying a cardboard box, whistling to himself like it was any ordinary day. He spotted me and smiled. Oh hey, good timing. I stood frozen on my own porch. What are you doing? He shrugged, setting the box down. Moving in. Figured it was easier to just start than wait around for everyone to agree. Robert and Linda appeared behind him, stepping onto my porch as if it were the most natural thing in the world. We assumed you'd come around eventually, Robert said. Linda added softly, family shouldn't fight over a house, Grace. I looked between the 3 of them, my late husband's family, standing in my home uninvited, boxes already stacked in my hallway. This wasn't disrespect anymore. This was theft dressed up as tradition. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. My own attorney. The one who had helped Daniel and me finalize the house purchase over a decade ago. Mr. Alvarez, it's Grace Whitfield. I think it's time we talked. His voice was calm and immediate. I was wondering when you'd call. I'll see you first thing tomorrow. I hung up and slipped the phone back into my purse. Marcus laughed, shaking his head. Calling lawyers now? Bit dramatic, don't you think? I met his eyes without flinching. You forgot something very important, Marcus. For the first time that day his smugness faltered. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't answer. I simply turned, walked to my car, and drove to a hotel for the night, unwilling to sleep under the same roof as people who had let themselves in without asking. The next morning, I sat across from Mr. Alvarez in his office, the same office where Daniel and I once signed the paperwork for our home, full of hope for the years ahead. Tell me honestly, I said. Can they actually force me out? Mr. Alvarez smiled gently and opened a thick folder. No, gracias. They can't. And I think they've forgotten something rather important. He slid a single document across the desk, the original deed, along with an addendum Daniel had insisted on adding when we bought the house together. When you and Daniel purchased this property, he explained, he added a survivorship clause naming you as sole owner in the event of his death. It's airtight. The moment Daniel passed, full ownership transferred to you automatically. No proubat. No family claim. No exceptions. I stared at the paper, my eyes filling with tears I didn't expect. Daniel did that? He came in himself, Mr. Alvarez said. Told me he wanted to make sure you'd never have to fight anyone for your own home. Not even his own family. For the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. Meanwhile, back at the house, Marcus had already made himself comfortable. He'd hung a few of his own photos in the hallway, moved furniture around, even invited a friend over to see the place. "This is a great house," his friend said, looking around. "So your sister-in-law just handed it over?" Marcus smirked. "She didn't have much of a choice, honestly." They both laughed, completely unaware that legal reality was already on its way to interrupt the celebration. Around noon, a car pulled into the driveway, followed by Mr. Alvarez and a county process server. Marcus opened the door, still confident. "Can I help you?" The process server handed him an envelope. "You've been served." Marcus frowned, tearing it open. "Served? With what?" "A formal notice to vacate the premises within 24 hours, Mr. Alvarez said calmly. "Mrs. Whitfield is the sole legal owner of this property. Your occupancy was never authorized." Robert and Linda rushed into the hallway, panic on their faces. "There has to be some mistake," Robert said. "This is Daniel's house too." "With respect," Mr. Alvarez replied. "Under the survivorship clause Daniel established himself. This house belongs entirely to Grace. It has since the day he passed." Linda's face went pale. "But she's family." "She's also," Mr. Alvarez said, "the sole legal owner." At that exact moment, I stepped out of my car and walked toward the house. Marcus stormed across the lawn to meet me. "You brought lawyers into this? Against your own family?" I looked at him steadily. "No, Marcus. You brought this on yourself the moment you moved into a house that was never yours to take." Robert lowered his eyes, unable to meet mine. "We thought you'd eventually agree, for the family's sake." "You never asked me," I said quietly. "You decided for me, and then you tried to force it." Linda began to cry. "We only wanted to help your brother." "And in doing that," I said, "you tried to take away the last piece of my husband I had left. No one had an answer for that." Marcus stood there holding the eviction notice, his hands trembling, his confidence gone. "Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at him, my voice steady. "The same place you would have sent me, if this had worked." For the first time in his life, no one rushed to rescue him. Not his parents. Not me. Not anyone. The moving truck that had arrived so confidently the day before now carried his boxes back out, one by one. His friend quietly helped him load the last of it without a word. Robert approached me slowly as Marcus's car pulled away. "I never imagined it would come to this." "It didn't have to," I said. "You could have simply asked me for help, instead of deciding I owed you my home." He had no response. A week later, Linda called and asked if we could talk, just the two of us. We met at a small coffee shop near the hospital. She looked smaller than I remembered, tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. "I'm sorry, Grace," she said, her voice breaking. "We spent so many years protecting Marcus from consequences that we forgot what it did to the people around him. To you." I nodded slowly. "I never wanted to fight this family. I only wanted to be treated like I belonged in it." "You did," she whispered. "We just didn't show it." 6 months later, Marcus found a small apartment of his own, paid for with a job he had actually kept for longer than 3 months. He called me one afternoon, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I bought a bed frame," he said. "First real furniture I've ever paid for myself." There was something different in his voice. Not entitlement. Pride. "That's a good place to start," I told him. That Christmas, for the first time since Daniel's death, the family gathered without an agenda hidden beneath the surface. No arguments about property. No quiet manipulation disguised as love. Just an honest dinner, full of the kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. Robert raised his glass before we ate. I used to think helping Marcus meant protecting him from every hard thing. I understand now that all it did was stop him from becoming who he was meant to be. Later that night, I stood alone on the porch of the house Daniel and I built our life in. The same porch where we once talked about growing old together. The house was never just wood and brick. It was proof of every year we chose each other, every promise we kept. Daniel protected me even after he was gone, in the one way he knew how, with a piece of paper most people never bother to read. Sometimes the people who love us make painful mistakes, mistaking control for care. Forgiveness matters. But so do boundaries. Because protecting what you've built, and what someone you loved built for you, is never selfish. And that is the one tiny detail my husband's family almost forgot.